recently I've moved all of my personal UI work into Sketch from Figma. And I know some people might think I'm crazy, but it's been an adventure. So I thought I'd show you some differences between the two in terms of workflow. What's different, what's the same. If you're thinking of also moving back to Sketch, a kind of honest breakdown of where it's better, where it's worse, and what is different, and also why it matters. So it's going to be quite a loose video. If you've been to my channel before, I tend to just talk. I'm not very good at structured thinking, so it's whatever I remember offhand. And if you've got any questions, put them out in the comments and I'll address it in a future video. I might do a part 2 on this and maybe do some more prep work or research because, you know, that's diligent. Anyway, so here we are with Figma and here we are with Sketch. Now, for those who are not old like me, obviously Sketch was a big deal before Figma came along and kind of took over an awful lot of the user base of Sketch. But Figma effectively started out as pretty much a copy of Sketch. It's sort of a one-to-one. It was like, if you remember back in the day when Doom was a thing and they called FPSs Doom clones, Figma was the first Doom clone and Sketch was Doom, if that makes sense. Wow, makes me sound very old. But what I'm trying to say is a lot of things will be familiar and some things are better. So, for example, if we create a rectangle, let's do this again. Let's do this. There we go. Create a rectangle in Figma. The keyboard shortcut is R. In Sketch, it is also R. Imagine that. And the same goes for most of the creation stuff. So in terms of creating shapes, it all works in the same way as you might expect. So we've got our object creation stuff down here. And in Sketch, you've got all of it here. So shape, rectangle, oval, rounded, etc. One key difference in shape creation, see all these basics are pretty much the same. The difference being inside Figma, when you have a circle, it has this arc tool, which is very handy, which Sketch does not have. So we'll go and create an oval here. It's just a circle. So there's one key difference. In terms of editing shapes, it's very similar. So let's just do a new oval. Could have kept the other one. Standard thing of, you know, whatever. Let's just split these side by side. Boop. Oops, hang on. Boop. Painful, I know. Let's just do this side by side and we can see a difference. So Sketch by default, for some reason, inserts a border by default. I think it might be a way to turn it off. But shape creation's basically exactly the same. You see? The sidebar works in almost exactly the same way. There's a few differences, but broadly speaking, if you understand this, you can understand this. The information density is a little higher on Sketch, which I think if you're a beginner or whatever, or very used to Figma, for the record, I've not used Sketch for 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years, up until recently. You get used to it really quickly, and also there's some things that it does better. By having more buttons and a denser UI, it has faster access to tools. If we're talking UI 2, there's a little hack to use UI 3 early for Figma. The problem's only compounded in Figma in terms of hiding stuff. Sketch actually surfaces things a bit better. And an overall takeaway from me would be, I think Sketch's interface is actually, overall, better. Is it the better tool? No. It does do some things better, for sure. But there's more nuance to this than just, oh my god, Sketch is the past, man, quit living the past. It's a very reductive mindset, I think. So let's go to a rectangle. So we just do R, create one there, do R, create one here. Now, in terms of things like changing radius, that works the same way in both. So hold down Command, do a single corner, same in Figma. Oh no, was it in Figma? Oh, it's Alt in Figma and Command in Sketch. The color pickers work very similarly. The shortcut to pick, let's just create a new one. Let's create a new rectangle. Let's make this one, I don't know, red. I is the color picker shortcut inside Figma. The same thing in Sketch. See, the color pickers are extremely similar. It's almost if one's based on the other. The keyboard shortcut is Control C, which is very nice. You still have things like copy style. I can't remember the default shortcut, but if you go into, I think it's Edit, Copy, copy style, you can copy, I've set this keyboard shortcut, you can copy and paste styles the same way as you can in Figma. The basic drawing stuff is all extraordinarily similar. There's one key thing that Sketch has that Figma doesn't, which is kind of sick, is and I know been on the feature list for a very, very long time, or the request list for a very long time. Oh my God, it's multiple borders. Well, they call them borders in Sketch, they call them strokes in Figma. It's a common thing and something people have bitched about, including me in Figma for years. I also quite like, you've got the draggy thing here, you've got little arrow up and down arrows in Sketch for the same thing. But yeah, you can add multiple strokes in Figma, but you can't do much with them because there's only one width. So you can do some limited stuff. So like, oh no, yes, you can't actually. So yeah, independently in Sketch, you can set independent centers and also independent widths on borders. You've also got underneath here, we have blend modes, which is also, I think, in here. Where is it? Where is it in Figma? It's under there. So that's one, see, that's another example where it's one click closer. In terms of the color picker, again, the Figma one was based on the Sketch one, so they work the same way. So you've got gradients. In fact, actually, Sketch has more gradients. You've also got the ability to create color variables. We'll get into variables later. That's one of the negative sections. Where, as in, you know, we've got this on this page section. We haven't got anything defined here, so it won't find arbitrary colors, only ones that you've defined. So it won't just sort of say, here's the colors in your document. That's one thing I think Figma does better. But otherwise, there's a few things it does differently. For example, let's, we've got things like, what's this? That gradient, I think. Does Figma do that? Linear. It does do an angular gradient. Huh. I'm on the stroke here, so you can't really see it. Do that. Linear, angular. There we go. So things are a little bit more direct. I think if memory serves, the image fill stuff, you can't fill with... so you haven't got these edit tools in terms of like exposure, all that kind of stuff. They are lacking in Sketch, which is kind of sucky. But what I think is better, though, if you do tile, it works the same way. Works better. Shocker. But yeah, this all works in a very similar way. You've got some predefined stuff here, which is quite useful, checkerboard, noise pattern, whatever, and you've got the same options here in terms of tiling, and you've got the size for it, but you don't have these exposure, contrast, etc. controls, which would be very nice. If you click here, you get a list of all of the things used inside the document already, which is quite nice. And also go here, we've got data population, which is integral in Sketch, but we'll get into that in a minute. So there's a lot of your sort of basics covered over in terms of shape creation, assigning colors. But let's talk a little bit about grouping and duplication. So there's some differences here, but some things that are similar. So one thing we do a lot in Figma, so if I've got, let's say I've got 4 of these, I grab all 4, I've got this button here, which is tidy. I put those into a grid, and I've got, you know, controls to set spacing. And if I change the color in one of these, let's make this one red so we can see, select all of them, grab it by the dot, we get to swap over. Oops, let me put that back up there. There we go. You get to swap over and move around the instances. Well, this never used to be in Sketch. It's one thing I've noticed that you have now. Hang on, let's do that. Whoop. Let's just do that. Same thing, tidy, and the controls are the same. In fact, see that? All works the same way. In fact, actually, the one in Sketch feels a little more precise, which is kind of cool. Kind of cool. I kind of like it. So that works the same way. There's one other thing Sketch does that I think is stolen from XD, which Figma doesn't. If you have 2 objects that are the same selected, or I think if you have multiple objects that are different selected, it might also do it. Who knows? For that, you can do this little draggy thing and create copies in a grid. It doesn't do different objects. It has to be the same object. Let's do that. Grab these, and if I drag it this way, and this can be anything. This can be, you know, symbols, components, whatever. Figma does not have this out of the box. So there you go. I'm not going into it too much today, but the pen tool is slightly different. It's a bit more fully featured than the one in Figma. You don't have the network thing, so you can't do like this, and it will be part of the same vector. This is more traditional in Sketch, where if you let us draw that same arrow, there we go, and we do that, press escape, click there, we're out of the tool, go back in, and we're going to create, see? We're going to create a new shape. This personally doesn't really bother me that this is different, because this is like Illustrator, Affinity, whatever, they all work this way. It's a unique Figma thing. But also, just again, because of my, like, how much I use things like Affinity Design still, the tools here just feel so, they've always felt so annoying. and minimal and kind of fiddly. There's times like if I've got, for example, a common thing you do if you're a vector person. I wasn't going to do this. And the keyboard shortcut is P in Figma or V for vector in Sketch. You can change Sketch keyboard shortcuts, but back more on that in a minute. So all the snapping's similar. And what's really common, right? Let's say press, go back in here, change handles. But like, what if I want to break this handle? I don't get much control, right? It's just sort of like a crapshoot. So if I do the same thing again, but if I create a, let's go from done. If I create myself an oval, and then I go like this, and I'm like, okay, let's delete this handle. What happens there? Sketch is a bit more predictable, and it's a bit closer to the meat. And this works the same way. I just press enter to go into edit. Again, these ideas came from Sketch, all the ideas in Figma. So yeah, the same operation there, deleting an anchor point. I get kind of what I expect. This has always been a little bit of a crapshoot in Figma. I think the base vector drawing experience, with the exception of this sort of like the network thing, the node network thing, which I think is, for me, I've never been, it's a bit of a here nor there thing for me, to be honest. I think is better in Sketch, to be honest with you. So that's a thing. But yeah. Another thing is, and this is getting worse in the new version, editing the workspace. Figma, you can't. Sketch, because it's a native Mac app, you can. You get this native, so if I don't like the way it's organized, if I think I'm not going to use this tool, what that is, I'm not going to use that, I'm not going to use that, I'm not going to use move to back, I'm not going to use that data thing, but I am going to want quick access to oval, rectangle, triangle, and then, let's just say, yeah, the artboard tool, who knows? There we go. And I can also, customize all this. Very nice. So another thing, which is good fun, this does do it on this side. Yeah, so one thing it's inherited from Sketch is it doesn't have the resizable right-hand bar, which is a UI 3 feature inside Figma that Sketch never implemented either. So let's jump in quickly to components, or in Sketch's case, they're called symbols. Same thing. So if we just go and create a lovely rectangle once again, actually, just before we do that, let's just corner smoothing. We're doing corner smoothing. There you go. There we go. And this all works the same way as well. Let's create the same rounded rectangle. Apart from, this is, I don't know if it's better or worse. If we change this into separate corners, you get a popover. This just flips the UI around. Also, you've got little drop downs for different kinds of squaring off, that kind of thing. Again, there's a thing with the general tone is Sketch exposes more controls to you quickly, and actually it's a little bit faster to work in. And things like if you've got ends, stuff like that, they're just a little less hidden. So if we go into stroke, and then we go into 3 dots, we've got the joins, we've got the stroke style. I think we've got ends, which are, I think, underneath. Where are the ends? Let's just do this. Hang on, let's just do a little line. And we'll get, yeah, we go. So only on a line you get the ends, you get to choose the end cap, or if it's got a whatever. Sketch does it a little differently. So ends are right here, joins are right here, and then you've got your dashing stuff here. So it's just more information dense, but that does make it quicker. You do have to click around a little less. Also, in Sketch, you've got a command bar, which is like, let's just grab this, Command K and do rotate. So rotate, jump straight into a tool. Same thing in Figma, I guess. But I find that, I don't know why, but I find this more useful in Sketch compared to this in Figma. So you rotate. I find myself using this less in Figma and more in Sketch, and I don't know why. It feels more conducive to speed in Sketch, whereas Figma is just a little bit more, it's a looser interface. This feels a little more focused. You get the feel once you're in there. Now, let's move into what I was saying a second ago, into symbols. Let's create this again, and we'll recreate our rounded pill-shaped rectangle guy. Amazing. So, Command K, whatever. We've got ourselves a symbol. Oh, sorry, a component, and then we do this same thing. We get a different thing. You can just, I think there's a way to bypass this. I can't remember what it is. You don't have to name it necessarily, but you get an option here. So I can rename this the same way. It all works the same. Call this rectangle, and it says send symbol to symbols page. So this used to be default behavior. It creates a page and it keeps them all separate, which is fun. Let's go back a little bit. If we don't do that, we're going off script here a little bit. We're going to create that symbol again. Uncheck this rectangle. It will stay in place and it will create a duplicate of it. Whereas Sketch. Sorry, Figma. This is getting very complicated. Figma doesn't. It just has the master one there, and then a copy just doesn't have the the notation across the top. Let's do this quickly. It doesn't have the notation across the top. This is a spoiler for later on. Whereas, yeah, Sketch does like this, and also, yeah, it works the same way. It just looks kind of different, basically. It's all good. It's all good. We can see we've got the same thing here where we have definition, and we've got this thing just saying, I am an artboard. I'm purple because I'm a symbol. And one more thing I'll jump in here quite quickly is you can't do this double click on the title to rename, but you press Command R and it just renames. It's not the end of the world. And actually sometimes I find it kind of annoying when I'm trying to drag, because I've got a habit of there's an overlapping frame thing that happens in Figma sometimes. So whenever I'm selecting frames and proper designs, I'm always very careful to actually select the artboard so I don't get things I don't want if I want to move stuff around, because sometimes things end up in frames. And if you're doing things quickly, they'll be over the frame but not inside it sometimes. I don't know how it happens. I'm too slapdash to pay attention sometimes. But the way I've worked around is I get the habit of clicking the title of a frame instead of just dragging a box around it. So when I'm clicking the title of the frame, sometimes I accidentally do this, and it's kind of annoying. So sometimes I've got I'll do this, right? With loads of frames like that. So actually, in a way, I don't really care that that's not there. And Command R that I think works also in. No, it doesn't actually. I can't remember what Command R does. Replace, I think. So that's another thing as well. Paste to replace is not there by default inside Sketch, but there is a plugin that does it by a guy called Daniel Eden. And there's lots of plugins in Sketch. We're getting off track here. We'll go back. So we're in a situation. We got a thing here. We've got two of these. So we're not going to go too deep on this. It's a big topic, but this is where these two applications diverge quite a lot. And the biggest way in which Figma kind of wins is components, and also the dreaded auto layout. Well, dreaded, everyone loves auto layout. I personally don't. I think it's overrated as a tool. I think like the first thing people go like, oh, well, the first thing I do is always click this button straight away. I'm like, oh well, do you need it? Do you always need it? I code, so I mean, pretty quickly, I go from Doodle into just doing it in CSS rather than like a version of CSS that's worse. So then go into CSS. If I'm working alone, that is. If I'm working with other people, it's different. But if I'm working on a personal project or freelance project, I don't actually use auto layouts that often. Occasionally, mostly the basic version where you have like a list of things and you pop a new thing in the list and it maintains spacing. Spoilers later on, Sketch does that. Basically, that's kind of the bit that Sketch can do. But anyway, we're talking right now about components themselves versus symbols. So symbols have overrides, and you manage them this way. So here we go. Allow overrides, rectangle, fill. Anything inside this component. Let's just do a little thing in here, a little circle. Look at him, isn't he lovely? We'll make him red because he's great. And yeah, we can determine which things get override. I like this. It's very explicit and a little faster, I guess, than the way you work in Figma. If you do the same thing inside here, we'll just go in and we'll go, whoop, and we'll make him red. Look at that. These are identical. You can't tell them apart. One other side note actually is the snapping. Look at that. Look at that spacing to the edge. That's perfect. That's not going to give anyone an aneurysm. Let's just do that. Let's just 29. Oh well, the wrong size anyway. Whatever. 19. That's close enough. That's close enough. So the snapping in Sketch is better than it's a weird feel thing. I remember when I first moved to Figma, my first observations was snapping felt worse in this really intangible way. It might be a feel thing, I don't know, but snapping and object placement in the workspace feels tighter in Sketch. And again, that's another general thing where, although Sketch is lacking a lot, I'm trying to be nice to Sketch here because I'm going to be scathing soon, don't worry, is there's a polish and tightness to Sketch that Figma doesn't have, where it's an older application, but also where it has fewer features and they haven't exploded in growth so much. There's not saying it's polished across the board. There's lots of little low-hanging fruit bits. There's lots of things that can be improved. But in general, Sketch feels more together in a lot of ways, in terms of like some of the meaty things you do all day kind of feel better. Moving things around, having the snapping work really well. I don't know. There's bits of it that just feel better, you know, feel more refined, feel more polished, and also it runs faster. That's another big thing because Figma's ultimately it uses lots of like decent was it WebAssembly. There you go. Lots of WebAssembly to make it run really quickly in the browser, but ultimately it's a browser-based application which has memory limitations, and also means it doesn't have access to lots of lower level things you get inside desktop applications, which can drive deeper into the OS and leverage some things that browsers just can't ultimately. So there's always going to be some ceiling on what Figma can do performance-wise and functionally that Sketch does not have, I guess. But the big trade-off obviously is Sketch is only on Mac. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Sorry, getting off topic again. So one thing is, and I do this a lot, is under properties, we have Boolean, that sort of thing. We have instances, we have text, whatever. So this works. So let's make a button here. Let's call this like button. That text is appropriately sized, isn't it? How big have I made any of this? Let's just make that 20. See how well prepared I am? Yeah, whatever. Oh, look at that color it's selected. Oh, baby poo brown. Let's make that a little smaller. I think I'm not going to replicate that part in Figma. Let's just do this quickly. Button 1, let's just button, and then we'll make the fill. No, let's go with that. No, let's go with that. Let's go to the same thing. Let's do the same thing. Let's make it baby poo brown. And then what's our font here? I don't care what my font is. These don't have to be identical. Let's just do that. Also, this keyboard shortcut is the same for scale. Again, this is an idea that they took from Sketch. Same thing works the same way. Press K, and then you get to scale. Same thing here. You get your scale factor. It's all pretty much the same. Right, so we have our two things there. So yeah, if we go properties and I do text, name text, I'll call this one like button name value, button, whatever. Oops. Property. Boop, and I have to come in here and I have to go to, there we go, button. There we go, Sam. So now if we create a copy of this, and we've got our, hang on. Yeah, button name. There we go. And then we go to here. We've got our linked up thing. Sorry, it took me a second. Hello. So this process is actually a little quicker. So we've got the same thing here. And you just go, well, whatever. And then we just create a copy. Just drag out rectangle. And then we just get, it's faster. Again, you lose some flexibility. So on this base layer, I prefer this workflow to this for individual overrides. It varies, but then also this goes so much deeper in Figma, it's not even funny. So things like variants. I'm a big user of variants. I love them. I don't like overcomplicating things. So a lot of the times I work in variants and I just do variant switches. So if we just grab out, let's just grab out rectangle 1. Let's just go and just do assets. Hurry up. Hurry up. Local components button. There we go. And then we'll just do variant. They look the same. There we go. Let's make that in green and make variant 3 like in the blue. There we go. Look at this beautiful work we're doing here. And then you name the variant. You probably know this already, right? That just does not exist in Sketch. Variants aren't the thing, which kind of sucks. And then the properties as well, we've got things like Boolean, so you can turn things on and off, so I can change value, whatever. You can also create Booleans for variants as well. All this sort of stuff, and instant swapping. Basically, this is your option in Sketch, is this one thing here. Text, obviously, and color overrides are a thing. So if we do the same thing here inside Sketch, the workflow is basically kind of old school. So we'll do rectangle copy, and we'll do another rectangle copy. I should have renamed these first, whatever. And then we'll call this one rectangle /1. And you know how this works. Putting a / in to a name, puts it in a group. 2. And I'll call out when these things are Figma originals. It's not like a, told you so, Sketch did it first thing. Well, it kind of is, but it's useful context to see where Sketch has maybe grown since you might have used it, or where it may not have grown. Spoilers, it's more of the second one. Yeah, and like basically the workflow is, I'll pull out this version and I've got this option to swap them, right? And this actually, shockingly, is, and here's where things get contentious, because like this goes so much deeper over here. I can build a prototype in a component which makes it like interactive within itself. Do you know what I mean? Like this goes so much deeper. We've not even touched on variables yet, right? I mean, let's touch on variables. No, just they aren't here. The exception of color styles and text styles, not a thing. Variables are awesome in Figma. They just don't exist in Sketch. But here's the question, right? Here's the thing with all of this is a lot of the times, and this is the adjustment. I'm not saying this as just a blind defense of one product over another. Is how often do you need to? And it's a semi-rhetorical question. I do know, right, about all the scenarios where this is useful, but there is the idea of a tool and leveraging a tool because it's there, or leveraging it because you can, right? And in reality, and again, I think this comes a lot from my sort of like semi-developer background. There's a very strongly held concept. There's a handful in development, but one of them is premature optimization. There's dry, don't repeat yourself, and there's premature optimization, and they're enemies of each other. So a common thing a lot of developers hold dear is the idea of don't repeat yourself. That is basically, if you can do something once, do it at one time and then redo it, right? So that's the idea of, if you make something, just make it an auto layout straight away, make it a component straight away. You'll use it again. And I mean, on paper, yes, but also kind of no. And the way a lot of the tools in Figma and lean you to go is to make really complicated structures. I've been guilty of this myself, right? And that leads into the opposite end of that spectrum, which is called premature optimization. That is, you've made a system so brittle and in an attempt to make it robust, you've chosen the wrong time to abstract parts of the system. So if you change a rectangle into a component, that's an abstraction, right? If we create a variant, that's an abstraction. If this then becomes a subcomponent, that's another abstraction. We've created a tree of dependency from one to the other to the other, right? We're just like doing this. And I'm doing this the most stupid way ever. We're just doing this, right? We're just creating a thing, and then we've created a system, right? We know this. This is what people do in Figma. The thing is, where conceptually this is a younger or less common concept for a lot of design people versus developers, it's a less, it's going to sound judgy, but a less mature scenario where you, as a developer, because the systems get more complicated and the nature of what you're doing is more entangled and more precarious, it's a bigger topic. You get stung by it much quicker, and where it's an older career, people have much more time to think about it. And I think it's one of those things which is going to come to more design people soon, but it's like picking the right time to say, I'm going to do this, or how complicated you make this. I've seen people spending a lot of time saying, oh, I've got to update my design system. They spend a day or two or longer or weeks, depending on the size of the project, updating something which ultimately makes no material effect to their end work. It's just maintenance work they've created, and they've not necessarily stopped and looked at some of the necessity of some of those things along the line. That's optimization. That is when you don't want to be dry and you do want to repeat yourself, because sometimes it is better to repeat yourself, and sometimes it is better to wait to optimize, and sometimes it's better to keep the optimization simple. And you guarantee you will run into this, and it's a very well internalized concept for developers, not so much in UX UI people yet. They'll get there. I'm not saying no one does it, but it's important. And the core of my point comes back to this comparison is you have fewer tools in Sketch, and that's a bad thing objectively in some ways, and it's a good thing in others, because you can create complexity, and actually this can be just as brittle. Having fewer tools and having simpler ways of abstracting systems actually sometimes can be beneficial, right? You can build a very big, complex, multi-layered system. And I've done it. I've created window systems that allow for different configurations of things to go in there, and floating panels that dock in certain way, and like this massive nested mess of auto layouts. And I'm pushing up against the limits of what auto layouts are kind of supposed to do, and all these edge case scenarios, and then delving deep and all that, spending all that time doing that, which I'm sure, again, most people watching have done. And then at some point I've kind of gone, why? Because the end result is this gets redone in systems that are more capable than this, right? If we think about React or Vue or whatever your front end is built in, they have much more powerful mechanisms for managing complexity in their components compared to Figma. And if you are the developer, or if you have a good understanding about the development process, you can actually start backing off from some of those things, because if they can be explained another way instead of demonstrated in a very long-winded way via something which ends up being ultimately a picture that a developer looks at and then redoes the work, you're duplicating work as well. So that's learn to code. Everyone should learn to code. I think UX people should learn to code. Just if we not going to do it, just to get a good understanding of when to hand over and what to hand over and not. But also, it's you can save a lot of time that way and save a lot of heartache by not making the systems complicated. And in a weird way, getting back to my main point and stopping the lecture about whatever the hell I just said, having fewer tools in Sketch doesn't necessarily materially make it worse universally. This has a big caveat of it depends on what you're doing, right? If you're working across multiple brands, the way Figma handles design systems is just kind of better. The library system in Sketch exists. You can create a library of stuff and save it to the library. In fact, actually, there's one feature in Sketch I'll show you in a second, which I really like, and I wish was a little bit more concise inside Figma. But yeah, having fewer tools is kind of good. So we have the base level here. We have nested variants and variant swapping. These can also respect scale. So if I come into rectangle 3, make the artboard like that, beautiful, beautiful work. And then come over here, click on this, swap at original size. 3 will swap out at the correct size for 3, right? It's pretty straightforward. So it's actually a very simple set of tools, but shockingly, a lot of the time it's kind of all you need. Don't get me wrong, it can be slower, but in terms of coming back and making changes, actually, a lot of the time, it's not actually that much slower. So, again, it varies. As always things, there's an asterisk in the corner saying all of this varies, and your susceptibility and your needs. But just to say, it doesn't have X feature, it's out the window. I don't think you're thinking hard enough. And you've got to weigh it up as a pro and con list instead of just thing is missing, me no usey. It's not that simple. And also, there's the reason for using Sketch. Sorry, I'm still on rant mode. I'll get back to actual tutorial stuff in a second, but is because you can buy this for $100 once. It's $100 a year for updates, but you can buy this once and keep it forever. It's a desktop application. I'm going to talk in a second about collaboration, because that's another big piece of this. It's a desktop application. It runs like a desktop application. You get the choice of having multiple windows. Imagine that. Or tabs. You can have both. You can save files locally. If you have the cloud version of Sketch, it comes in 2 flavors. You can have a mixture of local documents or remote documents. And you have a lot of those collaboration features. You have the best of both worlds in a lot of ways. It's not just this is worse because it misses X feature. I think about it more holistically, they're just kind of different products. It's not necessarily one is massively better than the other. But that being said, some things in Sketch do my head in. I'm not saying that is not what I'm saying here. The main caveat is all of this, it depends. Let's get back to what we're talking about. So yeah, that is symbols versus components. Symbols, technically worse, but actually, there's some good stuff here as well. It's fine. And the workflow for determining overrides, I actually massively prefer because it's less long-winded. And one thing also, if things are nested, if I remember correctly, I could get this entirely wrong. I think this is a very early Sketch thing. Again, I've not been using Sketch again for a while. Let's create a component from here. We'll call this one blob. There we go. And we'll put a instance of blob inside rectangle. And then there we go. Boop. And I think, yeah, so I can swap out. So if I come into a instance of rectangle, let's just drag out one of these. There we go. Yeah, automatically nests the children, which I quite like because you've got that thing of by default inside Figma, if we do the same setup, we'll just do a rectangle and we'll do an oval inside. Right, look at that. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Make that red. And then what we'll do, we'll create a component here, boop, and then we'll grab this, create a component here, boop, and then we'll grab this, take this out, come back to here, make sure we've got it selected, and then what we'll do is we'll put that inside. There we go. Nice. You inside? Yes, yes, no, you're not. You're not. Hmm. Hold up. How dare you defy me like this? There we go. Put ellipse inside rectangle. But what? Oh wait. Oh, it's not. It's not an instance. Forgive my stupidity. There we go. So I was like, what am I doing wrong here? Right. So we've got an instance of ellipse inside there, and we come inside rectangle too, and by default we have the options, whatever for this. But you know what? We to get to this, we have to do this double click thing, and we can still do this instance swap, but it's on a double click. And here, it's just here. And I remember when I first moved over, I massively preferred this from Sketch, and this used to piss me off. And you can choose, I think, on this level. Am I lying? No, I can say get rid of oval. And I'll just go, oh, hang on, blob, not oval, blob. There we go. And you just turn that off there. I find this override workflow way faster inside Sketch. So it's like a case of like an efficiency thing. I'm a big efficiency boy. I like efficiency. And there's certain things that are kind of nicer. I prefer this workflow. This works nicer. It's variable. It all depends. Right. So we've talked about. Sorry, I know there's a big aside and it's a deep topic. I'm gonna move on into the next deeper topic. Sorry, which is auto layouts. Let's get rid of all of this crap. We don't need any of this. Right. Let's do the same with here. Is auto layout. You know how it works. It's your best friend. Oh, we're doing shape. Let's do a. Yep. Let's do a frame. And then we're going to add an auto layout, and then create a rectangle. I'm going to drag that in. It's going to do that. And then we're going to create another rectangle and drag that in. It's going to do that. And you know how this works. Direction, spacing between the objects, all this kind of stuff. Cool. Now, Sketch doesn't have auto layout, basically. It has something similar-ish called Smart Layout. I think apparently it predates auto layout, I think. And I think auto layout wasn't quite. I don't think it was out yet when I first started using Figma. I got enticed originally, I think, by the collaboration stuff. But yeah, there is no auto layout inside Sketch. But I'm still getting my head around it because it's not. It might just be muscle memory, but I find it less intuitive. But here is my setup that I've pre-prepared for you. Which, hey, that looks like it does something quite similar. Apart from when it doesn't. I'm still getting my head around this. This is Smart Layout, right? And it works kind of the same, but it's dumber, but also similar to what I'm saying about the symbols thing. It's kind of like not necessarily dumber in a bad way, but also kind of in a bad way. So one thing I've not mentioned so far is the idea of artboards versus frames. In Sketch, artboards are artboards. You can't nest them. So frames inside frames, and you have the whole frames versus groups debate. Sketch, it's either groups and groups sit in artboards, and that's the end of it. And again, where this delineation, I think, between frames versus groups inside Figma is an extra layer of things to think about. I think I've always thought kind of sucks. That's how they display and how they behave, and there's different behaviors. And it's like, well, can't you just make groups behave the way frames do, and just get rid of the idea of nesting frames? And you have pages, and then the main things you're looking at, and everything else is a group. But groups can do things. That's always spoken to me. You may vary. It seems like an arbitrary line in the sand, really, but yeah, that's just an observation. Well, if you do like that, if you're like me and you think why behave difference, it doesn't matter that much, then welcome to Sketch, because Sketch just has groups. You don't nest artboards inside artboards. You just have groups or symbols. So yeah. We've pulled out two predefined symbols here called rectangle 1, and I think this one's called rectangle 1 copy. What's inside here? Yeah, we go rectangle and whatever. And we've set up some variants in here, or some overrides in here through nesting. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. This works the same way, detaching and then editing. Zooms you over to here, back to instance. It all works. It's can either be on a separate page or it can be on this page. All works the same way. You get color overrides, which is fun. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, actually, if we create a bunch of stuff, let's create 3 stuffs. We've got 3 rectangles. We'll make one red. We'll make another one that color, another one this color, whatever, green. We get fill ... We do the same thing in Figma. If we create rectangle, 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 make one. You see what I'm doing now. Doop. Doop. I get selection colors. I miss this. That's one of those things I'm like, no, just straight up, guys. Just steal that. They've stolen everything from you, just steal some shit back. That's one thing to steal. Anyway, so I'm getting back to the point. Smart layouts versus auto layouts. You know how an auto layout works. Smart layout's like a dumber version of it, but it's not actually that bad. I'm only just getting my head around it now because I'm so used to the way of working in auto layouts. It's a bit of an adjustment because it's kind of simpler. But if you're not used to it, it feels counterintuitive. If that makes sense. So, a smart layout can be applied to anything, right? It can be inside a group, a symbol, an artboard. So instead of having to worry about frames, you just apply the state to a thing rather than having a certain type of object which can do the thing, which is kind of, if you're not so used to the paradigm you're used to, it's kind of better. But yeah, we've got our symbol here. We've got our rectangle. We're going to drag this in. We'll drag in a second one. Look at those. Beautiful. Beautiful. Look at that. Lovely. And we'll create a few more copies. I do like this feature. And then we'll come up to here and we'll do layout, vertical. Now, this pays attention to the gaps between all of these. Make sure they're evenly spaced. They should be. There we go. And now, if I go and create a new one, it does the Figma thing. I did that a little bit quickly. Let's do that again. We'll grab a... And there's one thing also to be said. So when I'm dragging these off screen, I'm pressing C, which brings up this symbol searcher thing, which I quite like. But one thing, again, it's a weird logical thing of just going straight to the variant that I want, the version that I want. Via nesting, it's like that thing of that extra click you've got in Figma where you go, oh, it's got all these conditional things set to it, so let's drag one out and click all these buttons to make sure it's the right one. There is something to be said for like, well, that's the one I want. Let's just use that one. I don't know. I'm not saying this is better or worse. Anyway, once we've got, I mean, these are symbols. This could be anything. This could be a rectangle. If I drag this in, we can either ignore the spacing, so just stick it up, or we can just do that and it will respect the spacing of everything around it. But you can break these rules. If I change this, everything will move out of the way without any of the constraint things inside auto layouts, which is both a blessing and a curse. It means the setup for this is less flexible but simpler, and your base level of what you do, your basic version of an auto layout, this is probably actually going to be quicker. Also, when it comes to, like, let's say I want this one to be like this, if I do this still, it respects it, you know, and I don't have to set this as absolute or really do anything. I I create the thing, and then when I add a new thing to it, it'll just work the same way. And if I make, and the artboard scales correctly, and if I can let this like over scroll or something, it's just kind of, yeah, you know, and if I want to override it, I just kind of can. Same as well as I've got like a variant which changes size, it respects that as well. So, and this works inside groups. So it's like, it's the remit of smart layout is really, these positions, well, there's a pattern, pay attention, and yeah, and if there's not a pattern, if something is different, let it be different. It's not bad. It's a different way of working that I'm not really used to yet. I'm still getting my head around it, but actually it doesn't seem that bad. And for, you know, if what we were saying earlier about that really crazy convoluted nesting thing of auto layouts is, this breaks apart pretty quickly, I think, when it comes to that. There's certain things it just doesn't really do. But for what you do about 65, 70, 80% of the time with a lot of auto layout things, of just have thing in place. I think what I said earlier is most of my usages for auto layout is basically when I have like, again, where I'm not a massive fan of that. I mean, I don't have anything against auto layout, but like most of the time I'm just doing this. Right? A lot of the time I have a menu or I have a list of objects and I'm dragging it all in and make sure it fits correctly. This does that. So that covers an awful lot of auto layouts. Again, like a lot of the time, if it's a solo project or a freelance project, I am often the developer, or I speak very closely to the developer, and we both speak developer very well. So I can just give them code for something, right? Or, you know, whatever. So this part of being super explicit in terms of auto layouts doesn't apply to me as often as it does to other people. That's a big caveat. But for the extent to which my most often usage of auto layout, this actually covers it a lot of the time, not all the time, and it is worse. It's just worse. However, as of recently, Sketch are actually adding their version of auto layout, and they've sort of confirmed that it's coming. It's their next big feature, I think. They've recently published a roadmap, and it's on there. And I think they're going more for a penpot style of auto layout rather than a Figma style. So penpot basically isn't really an auto layout. It's just Flexbox. If you know CSS, I mean, most of you will know what Flexbox is, but it's basically just Flexbox, which is brilliant. It's the right way to do it because it's a direct representation of Figma's close, but it's not bang on. Penpot's much closer. They're going that direction. So actually, auto layout is coming to Sketch. And I do hope they keep this idea of having it being just a attribute you apply to a group or component, rather than limiting saying having a frame versus a group. I think it's never necessarily made sense. It's just a thing that was a limitation in Figma and that everyone's used to, so everyone just carries on. You know? I don't know. Anyway, we'll go into some miscellaneous stuff here. So we've got our asset view here, which is, it's fine. What I do like inside Sketch is this guy. It's got an entire page, and you have this entire sort of like brand book-esque thing. So let's just come back over to here. We'll create a rectangle, and we'll just create a color. There we go. We'll do create color variable, of course, one red. There we go. Fine. Come over to here, and we've got these individual pages where we can have layer styles. We have our defined colors. We have defined artboard templates that we can have, and also all of our symbols. I just kind of like this. It's a search where you can add stuff from here, whatever. It's a nice little touch. I find it really digestible, and it's a really good way, or an impromptu way of just having a little brand booky, thing to refer to. It's quite a nice little feature. Also, the C button I quite like. It works really well. I like it. I like it quite a lot. So what we just touched on there is the assignment of colors. So that's the only design token style thing it's got. There are no, I can come to Figma and I can be like, well, rectangle, what's the radius? Well, what's the height? Let's do the radius. Let's do it this way. Why not? And we'll just create like, I don't know, I've got this, right? I have already a extra small. That's not useful. Let's do extra large. There we go. So I've got these variables for things like corner radius, width, height, color, etc. Doesn't exist. And this is just one of those features where it's like, I think a lot of the features, again, my coder mindset, a lot of the features inside Figma that are simple are made pretty obsolete with the existence of variables. And I don't especially love their implementation of variables. I think it's come really late, and it's not as comprehensive as it should be for something which is a fundamental in any language. There's so many more complex constructs that you can create inside languages. I want to see a lot of those represented visually as well. So Figma feels a little bit late to the party with it. Obviously, then much earlier than Sketch, who doesn't have them. And I really wish I could just be like, yeah, just set this to. Do you know what I mean? That element, I think, makes a lot of the features inside Figma superfluous once you've got really robust variable support. Variables are such a big deal in Figma. If I was to say to Sketch, put in any one feature, even above auto layout, variables, it's one thing where it's just straight up a downgrade. I can't paint it any other way besides that. I think there were some plugins a while ago which dejanked it, but I don't know what happened to those. Who knows? So going back to miscellaneous stuff. So yeah, there is that. That's how you find colors. It works basically the same way. The other thing is data. And this is a feature I like quite a lot inside. Let's grab out this thing. Where is it? Oh, let's use a standard one, which I like quite a lot inside Sketch. So I can be like, where's that gone? There we go. Dave. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Let's make you 30, Dave. Oops, 30. There we go. Nice. Look at that. Hello, Dave. Right. So what we can do here is let's just make a copy of Dave, and let's just zoom out actually a little bit, and we'll make a few more copies of Dave. Yes, that never gets old. And we've got data. This is built into Figma. It's Sketch is a first-party thing. Data, and you have these data sources. You can define these yourself. They can be either JSON objects with rich data, so it could be like name, surname, etc., avatar, or they can just be simple text lists, or they can be image arrays. So let's just use sketch data names. Oops, hang on. That shouldn't be doing what. Oh, I just did insert. Hang on. Let's do it this way. Have I told you I've only been using this again for about a week or two? Where is it? What are we looking for here? What are we doing, guys? Let's go into, there we go, data, drag that. Boop. And that doesn't get old either. And then we go sketch data, names, and there we go. We've just done that. And I have one here for Faker, which is very nice. There we go. And there's something else, which is a big thing, a big elephant in the room, which is when Figma took over, a lot of the community went with it, and a lot of plugins. So there was a huge number of sketch plugins around back in the day, and a lot of them aren't maintained anymore. It's very sad because obviously they lost a lot of customer base. And for those out there thinking no one uses Sketch, I've done a bit more research on the topic. And that's not true, basically, because, when I was saying, there's that knee-jerk thing of saying Figma's done something I don't like, and I've been unhappy with the company for a while, to be honest, but Figma's done something I don't like. I want to support this independent company who are less bad, much less bad, but no company is good. Let's not pretend that companies are good things. They aren't. But you've got to do a bit of due diligence, because you can't just make it an emotional thing and cut your nose to spite your face. Again, I do a lot of development. I don't have to do massive, complex. I don't work on massive brands and have these huge design systems. That's just not. I like startups. I like small companies. I like technical companies. And I like doing development and front end dev as often as I can. I am not every user, right? That's it. I have my own set of needs that yours may differ, right? Let's just get that out of the way. But you do still need to make sure you're making a logical decision rather than an emotional one, because otherwise you can just. It's stupid. So let's get back to my point here. What was my point again? Oh my god. You tell I don't script these. Just make sure you're thinking this through before you make a swap. But let's go back to the thing I was talking about. What was the thing I was talking about a second ago? It was, hold up. Plugins. So when a lot of the community went, you've got a lot of plugins in Figma. In fact, actually, I wouldn't say too many, but the interface I don't like, and it's going to sound really silly. You can save them, but this always felt kind of clunky to me. I don't know what I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. Here's the ones I've saved, but you can just search for a thing, and let's say, for example, I want to do that. If I want to do Unsplash, right, that's going to be there, and I can run it, and then I get there we go. I got a windowed thing, and I can do a very similar thing. If I want to do data, I could do a data thing. This works the same way in Sketch, apart from it's a bit more native. So I get a rectangle, and I go like this, and then do unsplash. Oh, hang on. No, let's do unsplash random photo. There you go. It's a lot more direct in Sketch. But that's not my point, though. The point is how plugins work. So plugins in the API is better in Figma. It just is. And also, I know a lot of Sketch users started bending the rules a lot when it came to what they could do. But the way that Sketch's plugin system is better is because every plugin in Figma is isolated quite heavily in terms of UI-wise from the rest of the application. Whereas Sketch, that's not necessarily the case. If anyone remembers Craft back in the day, which was a InVision plugin, which did a bunch of stuff like this data thing before it became native, and a bunch of other bits and bobs. I can't quite remember. Things like duplicating frames. Sketch plugins go into, let's go into manage plugins. We've got a window here, so you just install them, which I always prefer. Runner Pro, which is a very famous one. View, no plugins, Runner Pro, settings, run bar. There you go, show run bar. Is that working? It's a new file. So, yeah, we go. It's buggy. So yeah, we've got our run bar showing. This does a few things. It's got a bunch of. Anyway, this basically we've got a company that's actually extended Sketch and scanned the interface, and we can do things like we can add buttons. So if we go to add toolbar items, we've got an extra row of functions. Get rid of that to remove these. We've got an extra row here of things. We can add more functionality here, and it's got loads of other. This is cool, right? You can't do this in Figma. I'd like to see a return to this. This is really awesome. Massive aside, once again. Yeah, so we're getting kind of towards the end of it now. I think the last major pillar to kind of talk about, and this is still like a whistle-stop tour, there's lots of devil in the detail with all of this, is collaboration, which is the one thing I can't actually show you because I'm on my own. But long story short, collaboration, having multiple cursors knocking about doing stuff, it's the same. It's not as robust, broadly speaking, in Sketch. It's not as flexible, but they have an opinion, which is something I quite like. So if you've got multiple users and you're on a cloud account, you get the same thing where, and these people are just working, they're not working from the web, they're working in the native app. You have another person in your team, and they're doing their thing. You can see their, same way as in Figma, you can see their cursor moving around, etc., etc. Fine. When it comes to sharing, though, and distribution, there's a difference in approach with Sketch versus Figma, and I kind of like the way Sketch does it. So if we're honest with ourselves, right, if you're working in a team and you've got product managers and developers and the other people in your team, do you always work in the same file, or do you keep a copy of the file, work there, then copy and paste your work into the one that other people can see when you're happy for them to see it? And don't lie to me now, I know you do it, because everyone does it. You do that. And the always on collaboration means that being like, yeah, I mean, it's a feature that I like, and it's probably the biggest thing that I working collaborative, having it all saved to the cloud, which Sketch didn't do at the time. You had to transact files back and forward. It was very annoying with working with teams, and that was the biggest draw for everyone, I think, at the beginning in Figma, was that collaboration and having, just not worrying about versions, having, these are living things, right? These files. That was the big draw. And I found myself saying, like, when it comes to seeing other people working in real time, especially when it's not people who are your peers directly, like other UX, UI people, product designers, I found myself doing things like, if I had a junior, I would inadvertently find myself just like paying attention to what they're doing. It's like, well, that's not cool. Like, I'm not doing this intentionally, but you find yourself almost spying on them. And it's like, and a couple of times very early on, I'd be like, I'd be, oh, we should do this. And they're like, dude, I'm not finished. I mean, of course you're not finished. Why the fuck am I even watching you? I'll leave you the fuck alone. It's not cool. And then the other happens to product, whatever. So here's the point, right? In Sketch, you can work in secret much more easily. So the way it works is, and I wish I could demonstrate this with another person. If I was more prepared, I could have done it. But the way this works, if you've got a file, let's just save this to, oh no, hang on. Let's save this to workspace, and we'll call this one that. Sick. Now, it does the update thing, and if you've got third parties, the web component inside Sketch is basically just for review, leaving comments, viewing prototypes, etc. So no one gets to see anything until you say they can. There's a feature here where if you do press save, for example, Command L, you drag the save, press Command S, it's going to say, hey, you change things automatically. When you're ready to share, create a version. I missed the window, let's do that again. Create a version. You do a description. You can do this in Figma as well. You save history. But there's this button here which says star this version, that viewers only see starred versions, including this one, which means the people reviewing it are spoon-fed by default. They just see what you want them to see. And it's not to sound conspiratorial or whatever, like, but I prefer that, man. Like, that's just better, where you don't want, and also, like, they don't get to touch the application. And this is the polar opposite in terms of, and this is a big deal, I think. This is the polar opposite of the way Figma does it, where it wants to bring more and more people into the application. Sketch is saying, nah, you know what? If you're a developer, if you're a product person, you don't need to be using Figma. You don't need to be learning that shit. You can if you want. And Figma's leaning into that with a new UI and all these new features that aren't of any use to most designers, and they're mostly of use to lay people to be like, hey, well, I've generated these frames. I've done the hard bit. I've got the idea. I'm the ideas guy. There we go. It's like that, and then that bit's like that, and I pressed the generate button. It's made this thing. Do a UX on it. Do a UX on it. Make it a UX. I did do the prototype. Look, you click that, and it goes to that. I've done the hard bit. By the way, prototyping I didn't touch on at all. TLDR is worse in Figma, in Sketch. But yeah, like, oh, I've done the hard bit. You designer, do that. That's the way Figma's leaning with what they're doing in their app, and it's not accidentally; it's intentional. By simplifying the application, it's making it simpler for lay people to understand the application. And by generating, crappy mock-ups and stuff, that's their they'll say otherwise, but their motivation is to bring more people into that process, aka have more take the idea away from you in terms of whether you design by committee or not, thus diminishing your input on your own career. That thing that pisses off all designers, all create people who make stuff of thing is person sees the thing, they reason about it, and they're a lay person, and they go, well, I can reason about this, I can understand this, just do the thing. Just do the thing. Let me reduce your entire career, your entire experience down to just do this thing. Just do the thing. There's no design thinking here. There's no experience here. But what are you doing? Just do the thing. You know, no one likes that. And being in a world where that's being encouraged by your primary software vendor, who's supposed to be making tools for you, is profoundly uncool. It's not about gatekeeping the design process. I kind of hate that shit where it's like you get a design person who's like, no, I'm the arbiter of what goes forward, guys. I know everything. And you don't. Everyone's got feedback, but it's like a case of like you don't sit in Power BI, right, and tell data people what they're doing, okay? Because you don't know anything about that shit. They do that. It's the same thing. You have ideas, you deal with data, you deal with customer feedback, but you aren't. That's not your specialty. What if they're like, well, there's a special Power BI mode now for design? No, they don't do that because it's stupid, because it's a thing that's easy. It's easier for people to see visual things and make assumptions about how it works, because that's how humans work. They see things, they recognize them. If it's something they can quickly digest, they'll have an opinion on it. The relevance of that opinion goes in that Dunning-Kruger thing of there's no correlation between the amount of opinions and the quality of those opinions. They just have an opinion because they can understand it. Sketch isn't doing that. That's the point. They keep that separate. And I really like that. And I hope conceptually, and they've kind of said as much, they've alluded to it. I don't think they've made a big deal of it. They might have done. But they've kind of said, no, we believe this is a good separation of concern. And I like that. I really like that separation of concern for the reasons I've just said. Anyway, let's wrap up this video because it's a sprawling mess. And the last thing we can quickly talk about is prototyping. You kind of know how this works. Press I, which is the color picker. What am I doing? Press I. I've got this thing here. You draw it, whatever. You've got interaction. This is getting better. It's getting better. They're doing smart animate, so you know it's getting better basically. And then you can view. I don't know why I've skipped prototyping. I really shouldn't. So yeah, this button here. If you press Command P. There we go. And then if we go, we've got our views here. Let's just make rectangle copy one. Let's make this more obvious what it is. There we go. It's red and beautiful. Command P. And then if we go down to start point is rectangle copy to. Oh, what am I doing here? Let's go back here. Hang on, let's go into our interaction. We forgot to link back to rectangle copy one, guys. Make that bi-directional. We forgot to do that. Important stuff. Anyway. And if we go into here, click this button, this is the start point. You don't have multiple flows, which I think just straight up sucks. There's no multiple flows in here. And then we can, whatever. Is there interaction back here? It works the way you expect. So we click here, trigger on, whatever. Where's that? There, so target rectangle, animation, whatever. You set animation styles, there's actions, triggers, whatever. It's fine. And the thing, again, in a mild defense of Sketch, I guess, it's the prototyping is worse. The main thing that annoys me more than the idea of not having multiple start points or all this sort of thing is the thing that with both of them is they both suck at prototyping. They're both bad. And like things like Prototype, if you use Azure or however you pronounce it, Azure RP, or you even use Frame. I mean, Framer sucks, but like you've got Framer, you've got Azure, you've got the two big kiddies at the minute are Origami Studio and Prototype. Prototype is insane. Origami is batshit. Like in terms of flexibility, they make Figma look silly in terms of their ability, and they're the right place to do prototyping. I don't think beyond basic prototypes, and this goes back to my entire thesis, is people have accepted the idea that they should go into a different application to prototype increasingly. And I've seen people do some crazy stuff with Figma, but it's slow and it's clunky and it's awkward. And there's better places to do it, but it's where you put the effort, right? And that thing of thinking of like, why do I need to do thing? Is thing important? In this scenario, how important is thing? Not just I have tool, I will use tool, So yeah, basically, if you're going to prototype, don't use Figma to prototype. It sucks. If you're on a Mac, which let's face it, you probably are. If you're not necessarily. Oh, obviously the big elephant in the room is Sketch is not on Windows, and it won't be. They've just basically ruled it out. I think also because with that aforementioned thing of like mindset of like we keep this separate. They've got a web view which, if you've got things like developers or product managers or whatever, other people in the business can have a greater diversity of operating systems that they work on. When it comes to designers, the majority, not all, but the majority do still use a Mac. So it'd be a lot of work for them to take a native application, port it to Windows for what is probably less than 20% of their addressable market. There'd be a huge overhead. I can see why they're not doing it, basically. I honestly would rather have it always been, I mean, I've never been this whole person's like, oh, it's a Mac only. No, like, if you can make something cross-platform, you kind of should. They've also leaned in pretty heavily on conventions inside macOS. A really good example of a company that's done this and walked it back is Affinity, who actually at the time were a smaller team than Sketch, but it's a much newer code base than Sketch. It's not that much newer, actually. It's a little bit newer. Anyway, they ported all their stuff to Windows, but also they leaned in on lots of macOS conventions. Things like this editable top bar is a very macOS thing. When Affinity first came out, they leaned into a lot of that, and they ported it to Windows. So now Windows, it's good. It's a good thing. In an ideal world, yes, Sketch should run on Windows. I can understand why they haven't done it. But also they've kind of said, when it comes to the majority of people using it, the people most likely to be on Windows interact with the part of this experience which isn't on Windows, is on Windows, and the other part isn't. So it's like, I get it. I don't agree, but it's not the end of the world, I guess. But yeah, long story short, if you're prototyping, don't use Figma. It sucks. Don't use Sketch either for that matter. Just use Origami, which is also Mac only, which is why I'm saying that. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up. There's probably loads of stuff I've missed. You could go on about this forever. I might redo a more quick fire, less waffly video if this gets enough views. But yeah, I think the core thing to take away from all of this is I'm an advocate ethically for what Sketch is doing, and I'm under no illusions of the state of the tool. Is it a better piece of software than Figma? No. Is it much worse? No. Can you use it? Yeah, probably. Should you use it? Yes, definitely. The statement of intent from Figma and what they're doing at the moment, I find kind of distasteful. It's not just like an anti-AI thing. AI has some utility, but the way they're you can see it's pretty clear to a lot of people what the statement of intent is here, and it's something I'm not behind. Right now what they're doing is a thing which will. It's a very easy thing to hide behind because you'll get the crowd that go, evolve or die, bro. Like everyone's gonna be designing with AI in a few. Spoilers are not, but everyone's gonna be designing with AI in a few years. It's gonna be take over the industry. You've got to move. No, I mean your job will change and it will adapt over time. But shill style people aren't worth listening to. And people with ulterior motives aren't worth listening to. This is clearly just a move to. Effectively, it's a move that's going to remove design jobs. Basically, the amount of people who will be, you can argue the semantics of it all day long. And like, oh, if you're a proper designer, and like I've been guilty of saying this, like, well, if you're in a situation where the crappy auto generational tools inside the new version of Figma represents everything you do, maybe your job should be at risk, which is a horrible thing to think. It's not necessarily untrue, but also it's like, well, who am I to say that? Who am I to think that? So it's like, the point is, there's a certain section of people who I think broadly it's not going to take over. That's not the AI taking over and making designs redundant is not how this is going to go down. That's just not how history has ever worked. And AI is remarkably and roundly pretty underwhelming. Things change in increments, not by big sways in this way, with this sort of thing. It's not going to go that way. I'll put money on that. And I don't gamble. But yeah, there will be an awful lot of people whose jobs will be displaced by changes the industry. It's already happening beyond AI itself. AI is a symptom of this, not the cause. It's, and also AI generation stuff will also remove quite a lot of jobs. Some of them permanently. And buying into a company that's trying to hasten that process, I don't think is diligent for you, for me. And the only way I've said this a bunch of times, to opt out of the AI training is not enough. And if you're in a situation where you can opt out of the company, the only way a company will ever listen to you is with your wallet. They don't care about anything else. You can say what you want and they can say anything they want. Words are cheap. Vote with your wallet, they'll soon start to listen. So if you can, even if it's not Sketch, the reason why I'm advocating Sketch is because it is the most mature of the alternatives, right? Xure's very expensive. It's not bad. Penpot's not there. Sketch is the closest thing you've got, and also in terms of familiarity and functionality, Sketch is actually closer than you think it is. That's why I'm advocating for it. Plus, they're a smaller, more independent business that aren't anywhere near as evil, and Sketch are fine. Doing some research on the background and of the company is they've still got a healthy number of users. I think from what I understand is as of 2020, Sketch has, as of 2020 announced they hit 1 million seats. As of 2024, Figma has 4 million. Also Figma, I don't know if that includes FigJam or not, so whatever. But Figma, that's circa 25%. In the 4 years since then, we can assume the number's gone down, but it hasn't cratered. Looking at Google Trends, the line does not crater in terms of interest in Sketch. Actually, it pretty much scans with what we hear in some of the data. So I think actually Sketch has lost users. It's not lost anywhere near the amount you think. In fact, actually, most of that has been growth from new people entering the profession versus old people leaving. But lots of people love Sketch. I love Sketch. You love Sketch. But I think, I would wager that number can't be any less than, say, even if it's 50% of those people from 2020, which it probably isn't, that's still 500,000 users. Let's say it's a quarter. Let's say it's 250,000 users. That's still a lot of seats and a lot of revenue. It means a company can still grow. It can still improve. They've got 100 staff. The product is in fine shape. Sketch isn't going anywhere. It's not dead. Plenty of people still use it. Anecdotally, I've heard, not just security concerns. That's a big one as well. Working offline is better for security. But even beyond that, there's a lot of companies that do still prefer it. A lot of big orgs apparently still use Sketch intentionally, not accidentally. Some want to move away. The vast majority, I think, kind of don't, from what I understand. A lot of companies are like, no, we're just here. We're fine. Not just because of the effort of moving away, because they've built so much process around it. And actually, I think a lot of them find that it works. So yeah, it's not every time you hear news or the news of my death have been greatly exaggerated, right? You heard that phrase. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up. And yeah, that's it. Bye.